People are shocked at the cost of living. They're tired of constant raise of taxes. They're tired of this gaming the system by saying, oh, we didn't raise your taxes except we increased your fees for everything under the sun. So they lay off people to keep their DEI programs in ODOT. That's the decision the governor of the state of Oregon made.
Right. Because I said the law means something to me. My oath of office means something to me. These people fundamentally, consistently ignore the rule of law. They ignore the Constitution, and they do it willfully, and they get to stay.
The point is this: $350,000 for Lakeview? No.
Nope.
$15 million for free lawyers for those who knowingly came here illegally?
Yep.
Yes.
But if you look at this budget growth, right? You look from 2001, 2003, are all in general fund, federal, other lottery funds, $34 billion. In 2001, that was the budget for 2 years of state government to provide everything we needed. 20 years ago, it cost us $17 billion a year. We're at 140 now because, quite frankly, all we're doing is driving people to a different jurisdiction where they get to emit more, right? So we don't want you to produce concrete here. We'd rather import it from China, where the emissions are 5x greater just to produce the good, and then you have to put it on a barge and send it across an ocean. It's better for us to do that because then you're emitting it in a foreign jurisdiction and not here in Oregon.
I certainly say, Madam Speaker, and I think Oregonians will agree with me.
Political bodies exist to secure responsible government and to execute the will of the...
Welcome back to another episode of Oregon's discussion on government efficiency. I'm Mike McLane. I serve in the state Senate. I'm here again with my co-host and friend, the great leader, Daniel Bonham.
You say it every time and it still cracks me. I don't know.
I don't know what a great leader is, that term, that Kim Jong thing, and I don't know why we do that. But anyway, you are the Senate Republican leader.
Yeah, it's an honor to serve.
And glad you're doing that because I also know that being tarred and feathered has a certain notoriety, but you got the crowd cheering you as you're carried out of town on a rail. I've got also one of the great staff and researchers, Alex Lopez.
Great to be back, Senators. Great to be back.
Thank you for being here. And we're talking today about the session that ended last month, the legislative session. It was a long session, and
it was.
Yes. Previous episode we talked about some of the good things that happened, some of the bad things that happened, and this episode we're going to talk about some of the ugly.
The ugly, yes.
The ugly.
Exactly.
So Oregonians know what's coming.
Just what they got, what's coming. Exactly.
Unless the governor vetoes it, but the only notice she's issued a veto are just Republican things.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Kate Brown.
and Kate Brown, and the funding for Willamette Falls, she line item vetoed that apparently, but that's we'll see the consequences. So Alex, take it away.
Yeah, we'll dive in straight into the ugly. I'm just gonna have to ask you, Senators, what was the biggest disappointment for you coming out of this session?
You know, I think that, there's a list, right? But
yeah,
for me personally, was to sit down with Democrat members of the Budget Committee. I sat down once with the governor and mentioned this, but when I went through the numbers and talked about the mission creep and et cetera, and to have Democrat leaders acknowledge that the numbers, the data says what it says, and that Oregon's budget is going to have to go through reckoning, and then to see nothing happen.
Yeah.
Because they had not the political will nor the inclination this session to prepare Oregon for what's coming. And what's coming is that the federal government, under President Trump or the next president, I mean, it's going to happen regardless. And that is that net of inflation, the amount of money being transferred from the federal government to the states is going to go down.
Mm-hmm.
And Oregon's budget is ill prepared for that. And the only way to get around that is we're going to have to come in and reduce our budget. The Democrats want to raise taxes. They propose historic amount of tax increases for a state that suffers tax fatigue. I mean, we should be in like therapy. People are shocked at the cost of living. They're tired of constant raise of taxes. They're tired of this gaming the system by saying, oh, we didn't raise your taxes except we increased your fees for everything under the sun. And people are tired of it. So when we look across, okay, how are we going to make Oregon's budget conform? Because we have to balance our budget in Oregon. We don't get to run a $37 credit card or $1 trillion credit card bill, right?
Yeah.
So, like the Fed. So, you can cut by just simply saying, okay, across the board, we're going to reduce 2% here, or maybe 5% across the board. But you can train a monkey to draw a line across a ruler. That's not leadership. What we're going to have to do is actually go in and say what programs are not core to the mission of Oregon.
Right.
Yeah.
What programs are not needed? What programs are absolutely core and needed? And they need to be funded and funded fully. And programs that are not core, not needed, need to go away. Or maybe you salvage some part of them, but that's leadership. And so my disappointment was to see that on the one hand, the acknowledgement was encouraging that people saw the numbers, they were sobered. On the other hand, my biggest disappointment is we didn't start that process. We kicked the can down the road. I think the road's a lot shorter than Democrats in Salem think, and that these consequences are coming. Now, I just looked at recently the mayor of Portland, Mayor Wilson, had indicated, I saw some press, so I haven't followed up on it. And just because I read it in the press, the media, doesn't mean it's true, right? But that he directed the city of Portland's DEI programs to come in line with the federal government's executive orders on DEI so that they didn't lose federal funding. Okay?
Wise decision.
Now, do you think the mayor of Portland did that because, you know what, that's a hell of a good idea? Or he looked at the numbers and said, we have to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And got dragged kicking and screaming
Yeah.
Correct.
we did.
to make that decision. So in Oregon, we're facing that. I look at the, my disappointment that they didn't do that. For an example, we passed a budget for transportation. It expect this massive tax increase. And so now there's quota gap. And, oh my God, we got to lay off people who plow roads. Hard hats and reflective vests, as you mentioned, the people that do the real work. And they get layoff notices. They shut down some of the stations according to what the governor directed ODOT to do. Happen to be disproportionately in Republican districts, rural areas.
Absolutely.
And retaliation by the governor. Sure it was. And so when you look at that, Representative Mark Owens, who's, I share a district with, we were having a town hall in Lakeview earlier this week. And one of the things that Mark said is, it's $5 million a month to maintain those employees that were given, layoff notices, et cetera. $5 million a month to maintain the status quo. Okay, well, $5 million a month. The DEI programs in the ODOT budget are $28 million. They're not in compliant with the federal, right?
Right.
So even if you agree with DEI programs, which I frankly, I'm not sure how many people in, Burns or other areas really want to hear about white privilege out there, right? Because their incomes, this is an economically depressed area, in these rural areas, the incomes are much lower. I'm sure they don't feel like they've got a lot of privilege. But anyway, even if you agree with the programs, you say, okay, look, we're going to have to comply with the federal government or lose federal funding. They don't do that. So they lay off people to keep their DEI programs in ODOT. That's the decision the governor of the state of Oregon made.
Right.
I want DEI, I want training for ODOT employees on DEI, and I'm going to lay off people who plow roads in rural areas.
Yep.
That's the choice they made. That infuriates me. And so they could have done that. She could have simply said, ODOT, suspend your DEI programs. And because we're going to have to eventually, because of compliance with the federal government, that's why I brought up what Portland did. I mean, Portland. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They originated DEI program. I mean, this is Portland.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that.
But the mayor making a pragmatic decision.
Right.
I have to do this.
I got to do this. And for the governor to say, no, I'm not going to do this.
Purely
Instead,
political.
I'm laying on, and I'm traumatizing these people and families. I'm blaming Republicans. And everyone call your state rep and senator and complain. And, they got ODOT, layoff notices, right? They took pictures of it.
Yeah.
And sent it to their state rep and senator. And so that's the governor you have.
And the best part is, like, we've already gone out to the public. You're doing town halls. We're talking to people. Like, the vast majority of people blame the governor for this failure. They don't blame Republicans. They don't blame the legislature. They blame the governor for a lack of leadership. There were Republican ideas to fill this budget void. There was a Democrat move in the House to have a different option at the end, and they blame the governor, and rightfully so. The governor did not lead on this issue at all. And so you talk about disappointments in the session. We have a constitutional obligation to balance. It's called the Highway Cost Allocation Study, and you have to balance in our Constitution the burden of heavy trucks and light vehicles. It's been out of balance for 4 years now, I think, to the tune of $600 million that the truckers have overpaid.
Wow.
We as Republicans have tried to call for special sessions. We've tried to put bills forward that correct this unconstitutional imbalance. Again, the Constitution tells us we have to do this. The first thing we swear to do is uphold the Constitution of the state of Oregon, of the United States, and the laws of the state of Oregon. And the willingness of this majority party over the last 3 years to completely ignore the law, to ignore Senate rules, to ignore the Constitution. People should be very concerned that the government that they've elected, allowing one party to have absolute control, is in direct conflict with the fundamental founding documents of our country and of our state.
Yeah, and you think about, where did they spend that money? Now, I get it. There's, certain aspects of fuel tax and et cetera, but even ignoring that, the money was there in the budget to just simply do an appropriation to the truckers or to relief for that, to balance that out. They didn't do it.
Yeah.
Where did they spend it? Well, I'll tell you where they spent it. They, go back and watch the last 30 episodes. We've been telling people and over and over and over, this is the way the one-party government, the Democratic Party in the state of Oregon, they don't have any checks and balances. And this is how they're choosing to spend the people's money when they say no to the truckers. And the truckers are not just coming in and saying, this isn't fair.
Right.
They're saying, you have a constitutional duty
to balance this. Yeah.
Democrats ignored their constitutional duty and instead sent money elsewhere. And to me, that's irresponsible. And decreases. I mean, this is one of the things that decays
Yeah.
trust in government.
I got thrown out of the legislature, right? I don't get to run again because I stood up for the rule of law.
Right.
I stood up for Senate rules. I stood up for Oregon statute. I stood up for the Constitution. And I said, I'm not going to let you do these unconstitutional things. I'm not going to let you violate the law. I'm not going to let you break our rules. And I'm not coming back until you resolve those issues. I'm getting thrown out because I said, the law means something to me. My oath of office means something to me. These people fundamentally, consistently ignore the rule of law, they ignore the Constitution, and they do it willfully, and they get to stay.
And they get to stay and give each other awards.
Yeah, I'm sure of it.
Put on fancy dinners in Portland where they present each other awards for certain things. And I just roll my eyes and I think, there's going to be a time when people look back in history because we know that time comes periodically. And the lens in which they're going to view this time in Oregon's history is they're going to come to one conclusion awfully quick, and that is one-party government seldom produces good results for all the people. But it's just an affirmation of the old adage that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Absolutely.
And you don't have any checks and balances. Yeah. And, I saw a meme the other day, and it was this guy, young guy, whatever, and, just relaxing at home. And it says, reporter for mass media after exhausting day of cutting and pasting Democrat talking points.
Yeah.
Because, I just started laughing because how often do I see the Oregonian and Capital Chronicle, my God, in spades, and these other media outlets just simply article after article after article are just Democrat talking points. Yeah. When we bring up these things, nothing. And their talking points just, I tell you, just the other day when the Oregonian ran an article about the $15 million that is going to pay lawyers.
Yeah.
It's being transferred to nonprofits and they're being paid lawyers. And I normally don't object to payment to lawyers, but being one, but they're going to pay attorneys $15 million over the next biennium to provide free legal services to those who knowingly crossed here illegally.
Right.
In the United States. So we have a border. They know they have to register. They have to go through the process. They didn't, the motivation, people always talk the motivation, they're fleeing, better life. I get, all right, I'm not going to debate that. I get it. I'm conceding. It is a better life in America, right?
Yep.
So, but they still cross the border illegally, right? They know they're here illegally. And so to get them through the different paperworks and stuff, and, on hindsight, Oregon took money that could have been used in 100 different places and is now paying lawyers so they have free legal services. Now, when that ran in the Oregonian, the title of it was Oregon appropriates $15 million for immigrant legal services. Mm-hmm. I'm like, oh, so if someone comes here from Mexico or Canada or Guatemala or Ukraine or something, and they get here legally, and they're an immigrant, right? So are they going to get legal services? No.
That's not what we're talking about.
No, it's only immigrants who are here illegally.
Yeah.
And so just even the headline was so disingenuous.
Yes.
And the frustrating thing is we have got folks in Eastern Oregon, Central Oregon, Southern Oregon. You go down the list. They were told no. We don't have any money for you.
Yep.
Geothermal wells that desperately need to repair in the town of Lakeview that is fighting to keep and solve it. And they needed $350, which they didn't have, $350,000 they didn't have to repair a geothermal well. which that repair of the geothermal well would not only just be a good thing, but it also would produce income for them as they supply geothermal, to customers, whether it be the state penitentiary or out there, Warner facility, or whether it's the hospital district. But the point is this: $350,000 for Lakeview? No.
Nope.
$15 million for free lawyers for those who knowingly came here illegally.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
I could go. I mean,
Yeah.
in fact, we're going to do an episode next, maybe.
Yeah.
Where we literally go through the budget and say this is what they said no to, so they could say
Yes.
no
to
to
this.
yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, we
that was my disappointment, that there was no commitment, no effort to roll up our sleeves and look through that. But when they did, when it came down to the end, to see that there was very little process and the choices they made were, as you can tell, I'm getting a little amped up, but I was pretty disappointed.
But if you look
Yeah,
at this budget growth, right? You look from 2001, 2003, our all in general fund, federal, other lottery funds, $34 billion. In 2001, that was the budget for 2 years of state government to provide everything we needed. 20 years ago, it cost us $17 billion a year. We're at 140 now.
Wait, was $17 billion just the general fund or all funds?
That's all funds. That's all funds.
Holy cow.
34.1 all fund budget in 2001, 2003. So 24 years later, we're at 140 billion. I told the guy, like I mentioned, I was at a national event. I told the leader of Georgia's Republican Senate, this is where we're at. And he said, we have 11.3 million people. We have an economy 3 times the size of yours. Our budget's only $65 billion a year.
That's incredible.
And you're at 70?
Yeah, that's incredible.
And I said, yeah. And what we did, and this is what's painful right now, because a lot of school districts are learning this right now. You got the one-time funding during COVID, and you went out and you created programs with one-time funding. And so now you're saying, oh my gosh, well, we thought we needed that program to fill this gap and to get to a point where we could start to achieve some of our educational outcomes, which I totally understand that people wanted to do better with the performance of their school districts, but that funding was never meant to be sustained. And so now you're losing that funding and you're saying, oh my gosh, we have to make all these budget cuts. Yes and no, right? This is the lesson that you're talking about that the state's about to learn. Like you created all these programs in the time when the federal government was just overflowing with money.
Yeah.
In 2020, 2021, 2022, the federal government trying to spur the economy, trying to spur everything, was just printing money left and right.
Right.
And so now here we are with this massive bloated bureaucracy, and economic times are starting to get normalized. The federal government's not going to continue to just spend and print money. You've taxed Oregonians to the point that they're voting with their feet. People are leaving.
Right.
People have left Multnomah County. I was talking to the CEO, president of a company yesterday, and he said, I literally moved to Washington County. Like I left Multnomah County to save the 3.5% or whatever it was.
Right.
So they're not getting my money. And he said, I could tell you 400 other people that I associate with that left as well. And so people will leave if you overtax them, if you overburden them. So this budget problem will be exacerbated. I said that wrong the last episode too, by the way.
Did you?
So if you want to go back and check that,
We'll
say that
delete
word
that
wrong.
out.
Exacerbated though. So this problem is going to get worse, right? It's going to be compounded when you say, okay, well, we've the doom loop. You've lost the revenue. Your services have to diminish because you don't have the resources to pay for the services. Your quality of life goes down. People leave because they don't like the quality of life. And now you're just in this downward spiral. Right. And until we say, wait a second, okay, what does government have to be?
What does government have to be? What government can we afford?
And to your point about the mainstream media, as opposed to the mainstream media.
Like
The
it. I
main
like
These
it.
mainstream
I like that.
media.
I'm not
Especially
sure
here.
if I've heard that.
This is-
before. The main scheme media.
But the Oregonian, the editorial board, a couple weeks ago came out and said, hey, we got to get real about this transportation package. Tina Kotek, you got to get real.
Oh,
Democrat
really?
leadership, we got to get real. And by the way, Republicans, we do need new revenue. No, Helen Jung. No, editorial board.
Budget's huge.
We do not. We have more money than we've ever had. We have more resources than we've ever had. And instead of spending $800 million on housing production that's not produced much housing at all, instead of spending $1.2 billion to give non-citizens health care, like I could
Right.
go down the list
Yeah.
of the
And we
billions,
have, right?
the
Yeah.
billions of dollars that we're spending on non-core, the mission creep that we've talked about. Like we cannot be everything to everybody. And so maybe we don't build bike and ped roads. Maybe we just build highways and bridges. Maybe we don't have a DEI program. Maybe we sand the streets when there's snowfall. Like
Right.
maybe we do the things that we have to do before we do the things that we want to do. And the other thing that's just been killing me is we had an opportunity, a weird opportunity, this weird space where all of a sudden people wanted to talk about a cap and trade program again. And we were at least willing to have the discussion. Right? We walked out over cap and trade. So this is not something I'm happy about. I'm not something I'm stoked about. But compared to the climate protection program that Governor Brown put in, the Governor Kotek's continuing,
Right.
we're taking money that is fundamentally fuel tax, constitutionally obligated to go to the Highway Trust Fund. And we're spending it on environmental justice, which is anything that nonprofit wants to spend money on.
Yeah.
So we're going to divert money from road use that goes back into the Highway Trust Fund, and we're going to call it something else. In the long run, when you do that, you break the Highway Trust Fund, which will result someday in a massive new transportation tax that you have to pay for because you've diverted the money that was originally allocated for that. If you think about lottery funds, how many times have we watered down the lottery funds?
Oh yeah.
Now
Oh
we're-
my gosh, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it used to be the pie was spent on a given topic,
Yeah.
and now the pie
Economic
is
development originally.
divided by,
Oh.
we got some
12.
going to school, we got some going to veterans.
Yeah.
These are worthy causes, but
Right.
everybody has now watered that down, and you've now adjusted how you spend your general fund accordingly. And so the reckoning's coming. You talk about it quite a bit with the federal drawdown, but I think even internally with our own budget, where we have money, where we have resources, and what the people are demanding. And if you go to the recent polling, DHM, others have been putting this out. The social things that Democrats rely on to fearmonger, you can't elect a Republican because they're going to take away your right to an abortion. On the list of the top 25 things people care about, it's number 24. 25 is guns, 23 is DEI. The things that they're really pushing are the things that people don't care about right now. They care about public safety, they care about affordability, they care about housing, they care about their health care, right? Like the three H's, housing, healthcare, and homelessness are really top of mind for people.
Right.
And so there's a public element, public safety element to that. There's, obviously the affordability element to those things. But Oregonians are, I feel like they're the tipping point where they're going to say, wait a second, we need a new direction. We're going to have to risk, despite Tina Kotek, fear mongering that it's going to be a Trump MAGA extremist that's going to take away your right to an abortion.
Yeah, right. You can just hear their ads.
But we need a governor there was an article recently, like the last pro-business or even business-minded, business understanding anyone with a business IQ was Vic Atiyeh.
Yeah, I think,
The 80s.
Yeah, Vic Atiyeh was legendary because, to get us out of recession, he was relentless. And I think Neil Goldschmidt also was pretty good about business development, And then I'd say, John Kitzhaber in his third term, not his first two, certainly was more aggressive in his third term than in the first two. And that was coming because we had the Great Recession. But we've had a string of governors, Kate Brown and now Tina Kotek, where, the budget has just had plenty of money. And, they've just spent. And, when you have to lead through a contraction, it's very different. And of course, the timeline people leaving Oregon. They just didn't get up one morning. Dutch Brothers Coffee, the layoffs at Intel, the shutdown of the mill or the manufacturing plant in Prineville. You can go down the list. And they didn't just wake up one day and go, okay, hey, it's time for a layoff, right? This took a while to get there.
But we should go down the list. So
yes, we should.
Hampton Lumber is
Right.
opening a new plant in South Carolina.
Right.
Gimmicks went to North Carolina. Tektronix went to North Carolina. You mentioned the Intel 2,400 jobs. Nike's at 500. Daimler's at 500. Like Dutch Bros going to Arizona. Like
Moving their corporate headquarters out of Grants Pass.
It's been 8 sawmills in the last 2 years. Like it is a relentless, persistent pursuit to destroy the business climate in the state of Oregon. And people say, well, wait, we're 48th in the nation in business friendliness. How do we get to the bottom? Well, let's make sure that the labor unions have the right to collect unemployment when they strike. Because, the 2 states that are ahead of us in a race to the bottom are New York and New Jersey. And they only allow private sector labor unions. If we include public, we might be able to get to 50th in the nation. We might be the least business friendly state out there.
Yeah.
And again, I talk about this a lot because I would love for a governor, a legislature to simply say, we're open for business. We in Oregon actually want you to be here. We're going to get rid of these climate initiatives because, quite frankly, all we're doing is driving people to a different jurisdiction where they get to emit more, right? So we don't want you to produce concrete here. We'd rather import it from China, where the emissions are 5x greater just to produce the good, and then you have to put it on a barge and send it across an ocean. It's better for us to do that because then you're emitting it in a foreign jurisdiction and not here in Oregon. Better to not have it done here, despite the fact that global impact is greater to have it done elsewhere. Can't we see the reason there? Can't we say it would be better for you to produce here in Oregon? It'd be better to have the jobs. It'd be better to have the investment. It'd be better to have you live under our regulatory environment.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't all those things benefit employers, individuals who are looking for a job, the government ultimately, who would then have more resources to provide more service? Like attracting business is the thing that could resolve a lot of these issues. And instead, right now we're pushing them out. And I don't know what the utopia is at the end of this rainbow, right? Like what are Democrats driving towards? A society where we have no jobs?
Well, yeah, the utopia they can't fully describe, but they're marshaling all of us towards it. We don't know when we're going to get there. We don't know but it's a utopia that they're passionate about. Their base clearly is. And, I think about the job loss, the governor is demanding a special session to address the 500 jobs that she says have to be laid off. Because by God, if they're SEIU members, we got to have a special session. But what about the 184 jobs in Prineville?
Yeah.
Right? She didn't even call. Nothing. I don't think she issued any concern.
But the mainstream media, I really like that, by the way. I'm going to keep using it. But where was the article about all those other losses?
Right.
There was one, right, that talked about the massive outmigration of corporate interest. There were some articles, multiple articles about the Intel layoffs because that number grew, right? Originally they reported 500 and then they reported close to 2,000 and they finally said 2,400. There were minor articles, mentions of some of the other job losses, but by God, when those ODOT employees were laid off, front page news on every media outlet.
Right, because again, publishing Democrat talking points, and so now we're going to have a special session for what they say are the layoffs, and you and I both know that doesn't have to happen under the existing financial framework of
may not
ODOT.
even happen. I mean, the governor already extended the deadline. She said, "Hey, we're laying everybody off July 31st, August 1st. You're out of work." Well, hold on. We're going to call a special session. I'm the hero. Let's see if we can't delay that. So now it's September 15th.
Now, another potential job loss where she's very aggressive about is that the Blazers could be sold and moved to a different city. So she just came out with a letter together with, Mayor Wilson and, don't move the Trailblazers. Well, thank you, Governor Kotek. Thank you. You care about SEIU workers and a false narrative scarcity that you're perpetuating. You care about the Blazers. Okay. Well, guess what is happening under your watch? We're bleeding 6,000 private sector jobs in June was the report, right? How many letters? Aggressive? I mean, horrible.
Yeah.
And that is incredibly disappointing. Again, we keep coming down to the fact that they just believe there's always going to be a bunch of money. The economy's going to be just fine. They've never been through a recession. They've never served in a recession.
Right.
I mean, I served in 2001 or 2011 when we had to cut budgets.
Right.
And Tina Kotek was there as a House member, rank and file, sat next to me on the floor. And so, this is tough.
But what's crazy, so to your point about cut budget, how much do we hear that this session? From the presiding officers,
my God,
the co-chairs of Ways and Means. This is a cuts budget.
Yeah.
Let me see here. I'm looking at the Common Sense Institute, which has got this beautiful bar graph. I can affirm that these are the right numbers, having served in the legislature. But in 2023, 2025, the total all-in budget was 124. The 2025, 2027, the total all-in budget's 140. So wait, hold on. So we're growing budget by $16 billion and we're calling it a cuts budget?
Yeah.
So to your point, you actually saw a recession, right? That
The Great Recession.
The Great Recession. So you had a budget that was flat at the time. I mean, it was
it was flat and there were a little bit more here and there, but because of CSL, they said it was a cuts budget.
Yeah. So current service level. Well, when you have to tell people there's no cost of living increase this year, right? That is a cut.
Sure.
Because it's built in. People
Of course,
understand.
we didn't have inflation during the Great Recession.
That's right. Yeah. And so then the value of the money is less as well. So to your point, that is a cuts budget when you're static. But when you grow $16 billion on a $124 billion budget and you end up at 140 and you're trying to, don't pee on my back and tell me it's raining.
Yeah, which is a great line from the outlaw Josie Wales, by the way, that great Western. I love that line.
But it's ridiculous,
Yeah.
and they've perpetuated it. So much so, again, to pick on the Oregonian a little bit here, that Helen Jung and her editorial board said, get real, Republicans. We need more tax. Get real. Like, quit trying to say that you can manipulate the budget to pay for these things. Get real.
Yeah. Well, first, let's get to some slides. I know
Alex, we filibustered.
Daniel and I can go on. And people love it. I mean, my God, I can see the comments in real time. They're huge.
Well, I mean, the elephant in the room, I know we spoke a little bit about it in the good. But, some missed opportunities here, what the Republicans would have done differently. And I kind of just want to hear your guys' take on the upcoming special session. And give me a little speculation. What do you guys think? What are you hearing with your colleagues? What can the audience kind of expect from it?
In the upcoming special session?
Yes.
One, I'd love to see what the bill actually says, because when a Democrat governor to a Democrat held legislature to media bias towards Democrats, I mean, when you go down to, so when they say, here's the framework, here's what we're going to do, I take that with a grain of salt until I actually see the language. Trust but verify, was that
That was old
maybe it's
Reagan.
distrust and verify here, but yeah, they want to raise 6 cents a gallon at least. Then they, registration fees here, fees there, and I mean, that's the downside. And again, it's this narrative that we had a bill House Bill 3982 last session to deal with this.
Yeah. So one of the criticisms I've had of the transportation package was they did a roadshow. And in the roadshow, they had a PowerPoint presentation and they put up hexagons. They didn't have any quantifiable number on the hexagon. It just said road use charge, increased fuel tax. It said weight mile tax. It said general fund. It said tolling. It had all the different license, registration, all these different hexagons that are mechanisms to raise taxes, to impose a fee, impose a burden on society. We would call them all taxes, but they like to call some of these things, licenses and fees, because that doesn't sound as bad. But we had very consistent participation from local jurisdictions, counties, and cities that showed up and said, historically, that fuel tax has been split 50, 30, 20. 50% goes to the state, 30% comes to the county, 20% goes to the city. We have roads. We need our fair share. And so that last ditch effort, one of the reasons why it failed at the end of session was they were going to do 3 cents, right? They were going to use this Band-Aid to get just what they needed, but they weren't going to give the cities and counties any of the money, right? They were going to keep it all.
Which breaks the deal.
Which breaks the deal. And so we've come back here. It's 6 cents. And again, to your point, though, we have not seen this in writing. The governor has not showed us. She's not presented this. There's been no public process on this. This is the governor
cooking it up
in her own bubble, talking to her own people. They've decided 6 cents gas tax split 50, 30, 20. So they've come back to that. Increased the registration fees by $42, increased title fees by $139, double the state's payroll tax. So it's 0.1% of your money that you as an employee have withheld from your paycheck to then put into ridership for public transit, about 60% of which goes to TriMet. So if you live outside of the Portland metro area, just know that you're supporting TriMet, and that's going to make you feel good.
I want to make sure I hear this right. She's coming in, she demands a special session the Friday before Labor Day to double the payroll tax that each worker pays in the state of Oregon.
Yeah. And again, I think if people saw the ridership and saw how few people were using transit,
especially since after COVID and all, and
they saw the total number, they'd say, well, wait a second, based on the amount of people actually riding transit, wouldn't that be enough money to pay for everybody to have a car and about $100 a month for fuel? And you could say, yeah, actually, we could do that. That could be a solution. But instead, we're sticking with this transit system. The governor also pointed out to me, she said, well, people use these for medical purposes. That's an entirely different line item that we actually have, that we dedicate resources for emergent and non-emergent medical transport that we have in our budget, and we fund to nonprofits and other service providers around the state to make sure that you can get to and from doctor's appointments if you're a person that is not ambulatory. And so this is above and beyond that. But we're going to use that as the excuse for why we need this. A $30 supplemental fee for electric vehicle and fuel efficient vehicles, right? So we're just going to add a fee above and beyond if you're a hybrid or an electric vehicle, and then a road use charge. And so we're going to simplify the weight mile tax. That would be a good thing. This actually does fulfill the constitutional obligation temporarily. To get in line the highway cost allocation. So we will balance light and heavy trucks with this plan. What she wants to do above and beyond that, though, she wants to use a trigger that if the highway cost allocation is out of balance, that we would allow the agency, without coming back through a legislative process, the agency can automatically increase fuel tax to rebalance.
Yeah, how about we just do our constitutional duty and leave not your agency, but the legislative branch of government with that decision,
right,
which is what it's supposed to be under the Constitution.
But this is going to raise billions. Like this will be close to, in my estimation, about a $10 billion tax. This is significant.
Yeah.
And I don't see how this stays off the ballot. This will get referred to the people. This will be on the ballot at some point. And the question will be, how do Democrats play the politics around that? Because whether it's a Republican-led coalition or just people writ large, they're not going to stand for this. People can't afford this. And they're going to show up and they're going to say, hey, let's put this on the ballot. And when it's on the ballot, it'll get voted down. This is a lot of money. This is a lot of burden. And again, it's unnecessary. When you look at, House Bill 3982, and I can't even tell you the significant hours that went into creating this. Smart minds from the Senate and Republican caucus offices, Shelley Bosshart Davis, being a trucker herself and someone that really understands transportation, Bruce Starr, others, Christine Drazen was an architect of this. A lot of time and energy went into creating a plan that allowed us to move forward with the jobs that we care about, the people that actually build and maintain roads and bridges, keep culverts clear, like all the things that actually allow you to get up and down a road, to and from work, to and from your family, to and from your place of worship, whatever it might be. But this would have sustained us at least for a few years to then have a robust conversation, comprehensive conversation about what the plan could be moving forward. And again, taking into some consideration the things that leak money out of this system, the non-core functions.
Right.
How did we build this plan? We went to ODOT and said, what are you being asked to do that isn't a core function? And they gave us a document, 40, 50-page document, outlining $700 million plus of their budget that are not core function. ODOT answered the question for us. It wasn't Republicans just saying, how many programs do we want to attack? It was ODOT saying, we've been asked to do this, so we have to do it. These are part of our budget. It's not really core to what we're supposed to be doing, but the legislature over the years has asked us to do this. And so we said, okay, well, we're the legislature. We can ask you not to do it. And so we built a plan around that. We said, okay, we can move forward with ODOT doing core function, eliminate some mission creep, eliminate some budget overspend, eliminate the jobs that are temporary, open positions that were never filled. Like just some good governance was built into that. And then when we looked at the ridership of rural transit, we said, oh my gosh, how can we justify taxing individuals to pay for something that's just not being used?
And of course, Senator Bonham, what happened to that bill?
It never got real consideration.
Right.
We used it as an amendment to their massive transportation bill. And again, this is where members of the minority party, Representative Gamba specifically, said this is grossly irresponsible.
Grossly irresponsible to make ODOT focus on core mission.
But it was accountability too, right? There were some reorganization elements to this bill that would change, the layers of management that are involved. It would change how you take on and tackle large projects, which ODOT has not done well at all. And a lot of things that were driven by a study that Senator Bruce Starr put forward and said, let's bring in these consultants. I think we spent $50,000 to have people that really have good Department of Transportation experience throughout the nation. What are other states doing? Who's doing this really well? How should we organize this agency to be more efficient, to streamline, to create some accountability? And they came in with recommendations. We incorporated those into our bill, and the state paid for that study. So Democrats agreed to allow us with state funds to hire consultants to tell us how to do this better, and then they completely ignored
it.
Ignored it because it didn't fit their narrative.
Nope.
Their political narrative, and ultimately, this insatiable appetite for new money without any sort of reform or at least genuine assessment on how are we performing. And then, as you said, ODOT actually told you. Well, I want to move it along. I know we've got, there were some big giveaways, Senate Bill 916, for an example. We talked about that last episode, but, even the playing field, which was a joke because it's tilted already. And if you look at the laws of the state of Oregon, but what they said is it's tilted already in favor of labor. But when they say, hey, when there's a collective bargaining process going on and corporation says, or a state agency or a school district or a hospital district says, we can't afford what you're demanding. And then the union says, we're going to go on strike. Okay, that's that leverage point, which no one, I'm sure, enjoys getting to in collective bargaining. But now, under Senate Bill 916, passed, with I don't believe any Republican votes. The only thing bipartisan about it was its opposition, and it gives unemployment benefits to striking workers, which is quite shocking. And as you pointed out, the only one who does that in the nation now is us, as to public employees. So then, they targeted the Freedom Foundation with House Bill 3789, a bill run right smack against it, because the Freedom Foundation has the audacity to tell public employees that under the law, they don't actually have to be union members.
Right.
To receive protection.
So go back to 916 for just half a second. I was I was over here busily reading through all the different news articles. This is one that the media got right? Like the Oregonian had multiple editorial boards saying, don't do this. Willamette Week said, this is a terrible idea. Why are you considering this? The Statesman Journal, who normally is not an ally of ours in any way, shape, or form, came out and said, this is problematic. So they ignored that because it was for their labor union friends. They put forward House Bill 3789, targeting the Freedom Foundation. And they said, it's illegal in Oregon to impersonate an attorney, a policeman, a firefighter, or a doctor. And right there with them should be a labor union representative. Illegal to impersonate a labor union representative. And so I said, okay, well, what's the evidence that you have that they're impersonating members of the labor union? And they said, well, we have reports that they show up in purple shirts at the door with a clipboard asking them to consider something to do with a member of SEIU. That's their color, purple and yellow. And so that's the evidence. And look at this mailer where they're pretending to be OSEA. Look at this and block blue letters. If you use block blue letters, even if it's a different font, but they're all capitalized, which you would do because it's an acronym, forget that. That this is an abbreviated name and you use the first letter of each of the words. Can't do that. And you can't use the same color. And so I said, okay, so the Exhibit A from the Freedom Foundation that they're not impersonating you is the same exhibit that you're putting forward that says that they are. And you can see the return envelope is to the Freedom Foundation. And I can't remember the other name that they use, but it's, optout.org or something like that. And so you're saying it is, they're saying it isn't. Who's the arbiter of whether or not this is impersonation? And of course, I'm looking at my fellow members of the committee saying, are you guys not seeing that this is a problem? That they're both saying the exact same thing represents the polarizing arguments. And we move forward with it anyway, with no clarity, no specification of what it means to impersonate. And this absolutely is a group that after the Janus decision, there was a Supreme Court decision that said you don't have to be a member of the labor union. Labor unions have created windows to opt out, right? You can only opt out during this 30-day period. You can't opt out whenever you want. Like, they've really made it hard to opt out. And so the Freedom Foundation and others have said, you spend $1,200 a year being a member of the labor union. How would you like a check for $1,200? Well, that's dishonest. That's impersonating a member of the labor union. So I asked this question too, because this is fascinating. This is before the Labor and Business Committee. I said, how big of idiots do you think your members are? This is so insulting that you think a member of a labor union receiving a document that says opt out, there are benefits to not being part of a labor union, that they read that and they're fooled. I can't believe my labor union's asking me to leave. Like, that's what you're saying about your own members, that you think that this person read this flyer saying, get out of SEIU, get out of OSEA, get out of whatever it might be. And that they're thinking, I can't believe my labor union's telling me to get out. Like,
No, it absolutely is disingenuous at best and dishonest at worst what they're claiming.
Highly insulting too
and
to their own members.
I know. And that's how, yeah. And so even faced with the facts, Democrat members of the committee and of course on the floor, they just pass the bill.
Yeah.
Right. They salute. These guys pay for our campaigns. We got to do it.
Yeah.
And just pathetic. I mean, I suppose what's going to happen now is that someone's going to file a declaratory action in court, say, hey, judge, you tell us if this is impersonating or not. I mean, the goal, obviously, of SEIU, Public Employee Union, and the others is to have Freedom Foundation go away. I mean, they don't want their members to be reminded that the United States Supreme Court has said it's unconstitutional to require them to pay union dues, without their consent. And so, and of course, that's been interpreted to mean that, the implied consent. I mean, so then in order to withdraw from the union, they have all these barriers and hoops. Which I think in and of themselves, I mean, if you exercised your right to free speech or, which the Democrats, the core to their party on the West Coast is right, right to an abortion. Well, what if someone put all these barriers in front of a right to abortion? You think they'd have a problem with that? Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, but it's partisan and political and disingenuous. But that's the government Oregon got by, again, without any check and balance, without any sort of process to vet bad ideas. They just pass this stuff because they have the political power. They got the numbers.
I enjoyed my interaction this session with Senator Anthony Broadman. I thought he was a thoughtful member.
Yeah,
right?
He is.
He's smart. He's engaged. This bill was before my committee. He was a sponsor and asking him some of these questions. Like, do you think these members are idiots? Well, the state of mind of the individual that's being targeted by this potential fraud is not the consideration. And I said, well, what about, at the end of the day, like we're leaving a lot of vagary here. Should we not create some more clarity as to what impersonation is? And so on the record, I got him to say, wearing the T-shirt of a color is not impersonation. Using a similar font is not impersonation. And so it'll be interesting to see, because none of that's in the bill, right? It's on the public record. And at the end of the day, we always go back to the language matters more. Unless it's ballot measure 113, then it's the will of the voters.
Yes.
Which members of our Supreme Court can divine.
We could get into that.
but it was interesting, right? Like, we're the legislature, we're creating a law, and you're willing to leave vagary in this. For what purpose, right? Like, why would you not want specificity? Why would you not want to distinguish what really is truly impersonation?
Right. Yeah, it does, and it's going to leave it up to the court, and the risk to Freedom Foundation or any other group is the financial devastation that comes if they're on the wrong side of it,
right? Because
it's clearly meant to put you out of business,
right? I
mean, that's in the end, that's exactly what it was meant. Well, that's the bad. We've talked about the good, the bad, but we got to wrap it up, and then we'll in a future episode we'll talk about the ugly. Now, we did talk about some of the ugly, but I think there's even more ugly.
There's even more. We'll have a full episode on more ugliness, I guess. And going through the budget priorities and what they chose to.
Yeah, which is important because, this episode is a discussion on government efficiency, but we're going to also talk about the horrific inefficiencies and where there is, the classic waste, fraud, and abuse. And because in the end, transparency is good, bringing things to the light is good, and that's what this podcast does. It's a frank discussion, brings things to the light. So Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.